Hey everyone, this short video will answer which software developers maintain the Bitcoin network. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Bitcoin was developed as an open source project, which means anybody in the world can see the software development code that is used to build the network. And that was built by Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin. He ultimately enrolled a number of other software developers, Gavin Andresen, Mike Hearn, and others. They ultimately enrolled other software developers. They ended up with a team of extremely talented software developers working for free on this amazing new open source project called Bitcoin. And the software that runs the Bitcoin network is called Bitcoin Core, C-O-R-E. So Bitcoin Core is a piece of software. An average person is not going to run it, but it is the software that is run by the Bitcoin miners, and it's the software that's run by people who want to run what's called a Bitcoin node, which is people that want to validate the entire network and all of its transactions themselves for a variety of reasons. Average people, again, are not going to do that, though. So anyway, but the code is called Bitcoin Core. So that core group of software developers grew and grew and grew, and includes some of the most talented people in the entire world that do software development. And that group changes over time. There's a group of about between half a dozen and a dozen that make most of the changes, and they are really some of the most skilled software developers that have ever written lines of code. Okay, so how do they get paid? Well, in the early days, they didn't. It was an entirely volunteer project, and that they just did it for a passion for trying to give the world the gift of sound money, money that could not be debased by central governments, etc. Over time, obviously, people got concerned that that would not be sustainable, so a number of nonprofit organizations popped up, including one called Brink, B-R-I-N-K. And Brink gets their name from the original quote from Satoshi Nakamoto that is buried in the original, what's called the Genesis block. The very first block of Bitcoin transactions has I guess the saying in it. It says, "Times London, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout." And it was the headline of the January 3 of 2009. That was the headline of the Times of London. And Satoshi embedded that just so that people would know that he had not mined the block prior to that date, because obviously he would not have known what the headline of the Times of London January 3rd edition was going to be in advance. But anyway, so Chancellor on the brink, the word brink is in there, and so Brink is one of the groups that funds open source software development. You can donate money to it, just like you can donate money to Wikipedia, which is run by a nonprofit foundation, or Signal, the messaging app that most of the people I know use Signal now. You can donate money to Signal. They will use that to support the software developers that maintain the Signal application. And anyway, so Brink is one of the companies that supports open source software developers that maintain Bitcoin. And then there's also Spiral, I believe it's called Spiral, which is one of Jack Dorsey's companies. Jack Dorsey was one of the founders of Twitter, ultimately sold it to Elon Musk. And during the time he was running Twitter, Jack Dorsey started a company called Square, which is a payments company that does a lot of point of sale processing for transactions paid for with smartphones and at small businesses. Anyway, Square, ultimately he changed the name of the company to Block, to name it after the blockchain, because he wanted to go all in on Bitcoin. And they are also the company behind Bitkey, Bitkey, which is the self-custody solution that I recommend to people. So that company, Block, has a subsidiary called Spiral. They like names like Block and Square and Spiral, and I think they even have something called Circle or something. But anyway, they have a subsidiary called Spiral. I believe that's the subsidiary that funds open source development of Bitcoin's core developers. So to recap, the software that runs Bitcoin is called Bitcoin Core. It is maintained by software developers. It is open source software, so anyone in the world can look at it. And there's a massive army of very talented software developers that review every code change to make sure it's not going to somehow mess up the network. And then obviously there's hackers constantly trying to find vulnerabilities in the network, because if they can, they could try to exploit them somehow. So there's lots of people, I guess, hacking away at Bitcoin all the time, which makes it more secure every day. But anyway, those software developers, some of them continue to work for free because they do not want to get paid by anyone. They just want to do it on their own. Some of those software developers are anonymous, so nobody even knows who they are, and they communicate, via secure channels and things like that. But the software developers that people do know who they are, most of those are paid for by the nonprofit open source foundations that support development on Bitcoin Core, and the largest of those are Brink and Spiral. And then there's a variety of others as well. And again, I would point to other open source projects as well, like Linux is maintained by the Linux Foundation, which pays for the salary of Linus Torvalds, the original developer of Linux. And obviously, if Satoshi Nakamoto was still around, or if anybody knew who he was, he would have an endless supply of people willing to subsidize his salary. So anyway, but it's a great setup. It's very decentralized, similar to Wikipedia and Signal and things like that, where the best software developers in the world do the best work. They don't have to worry about collecting a paycheck, and they are supported in a nonprofit way that keeps any one company or any one government or anything from exerting pressure over any of these guys and or women. It's a whole mix of, it's a very diverse group of men and women from all over the world, all different backgrounds that share a passion for sound money. And they're all involved, and anyone in the world can submit a change to the Bitcoin Core protocol or the Bitcoin Core software. Obviously, you have to be a pretty amazing software developer to come up with something nobody else has thought of, or to find bugs that nobody else has thought of, and submit those to the open source Bitcoin project. But if you can do that, it's an open source project, so anyone can submit an improvement. And if one of the core developers that has rights to merge that change into the core software, if they like your change, they will merge it in, and then it will become part of the next software round. Now, getting those changes merged in is actually super hard, because Bitcoin is such a big deal and it's worth more than $1 trillion. And so people don't make changes lightly. There's an extremely rigorous review process of the top software developers in order to make any changes to the code, because everybody wants to make sure they don't accidentally introduce bugs or unintended consequences. So, but anyway, it's a great model, and it's worked well, and it's worked well enough that BlackRock and Fidelity and all of the all of the firms on Wall Street that have Bitcoin ETFs are willing to build those Bitcoin ETFs on Bitcoin. So they are entirely dependent on those software developers and the code working as planned, which it has, for 15 years now. And so it's the most resilient, highest uptime network that humans have ever created, which is pretty incredible. And I have a great deal of respect for the developers that keep it running every single day. So that's who's building and developing the Bitcoin software. That software is run by millions of computers all over the world in a very decentralized way. There is nobody in charge of any of that, so each of those software developers works independently. So they may be paid by Brink or Spiral or something like that, or have their salary subsidized by it, but ultimately each of them works autonomously and nobody's in charge. So just like nobody's in charge with Bitcoin, and just like a lot of decentralized projects, no one person is in charge, the development of Bitcoin works the same way. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll try to knock out a couple other short videos this afternoon to answer specific questions.